human beings are unpredictable and complex, and we are with human beings the whole time we're doing research. You have to be able to think on your feet or be prepared for something unexpected to happen when we are interviewing participants, but it's really a guided conversation. It could take so many different pathways, and you need to be ready to identify that aha moment, that thing that you weren't expecting, and dig into that and go down that rabbit hole. But then also know when to stop going down that rabbit hole and have all of the questions that help unfold this unexpected discovery, but then be able to move on to the next thing and cover the topics that you want to cover. So making sure that you can be flexible in that way goes so far in this type of work.
Hello and welcome to Awkward Silences Live, the only podcast that brings together insights, design, research, UX, all things human-centered design thinking and research. I'm Ben, and my guest today is the VP of Qualitative Research at C+R Research, Nancy Baum. Nancy, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And you and I, we talked earlier in the summer at the Crux event that User Interviews put on. And we were talking about, among many other things, just the role and importance and standing of qualitative research today, that is 2025. It's been sort of buffeted by a couple of different innovations, which we'll get to, although it's still so relevant, important, and if anything, all of the new data and automations and ways of working necessitate the core foundation of what makes qualitative research great now and great then, hence the name of our conversation, The Enduring Value. So we're going to try to talk about where qualitative research is today, reflect a bit about where it's come from, and then hopefully make some projections about where it's going and how you and your team or your organization can continue to make decisions with the why that qual can often generate. So lots of things. But Nancy, why don't you start us off with your background, because it informs a lot of what you do at C+R. So let's start with your background in anthropology and some of your weaving paths to get to C+R.
Yeah. So I did start my kind of research career studying anthropology. So I have a master's degree in applied anthropology, studying cultural anthropology, and also have a master's in public health. So a lot of where I started was very, not surprisingly, academically based, and kind of learning about the traditional forms of qualitative research from the lens of anthropology and social sciences. And from that, I then conducted research for a couple of nonprofits, doing qualitative research for them, and specifically understanding barriers in utilizing services for individuals suffering from food insecurity. So doing research for local food banks in the area that I was living in. And then I kind of jumped around to a couple different kind of qualitative / research places, being either the lone researcher, the lone qualitative researcher, learning some different things, being exposed to some different environments and researching different topics, and then landed where I am with C+R. And I've been with C+R for about 8 years and work with a whole team of qualitative researchers and moderators, and we conduct research across a range of industries and populations and topics. We do research for nonprofits. We also do research for durable goods manufacturers, for CPG companies, for tech, finance, insurance, healthcare. So it's just a broad range of different types of topics that we research. And so with all of that, I feel like I wear a lot of different hats, and the type of work that we do, and then bringing in, that academic training that I got. And then here we are today with this wide range of topics and industries.
Applied anthropology makes me think that you well, I'll ask instead of declaring, was ethnographic immersive sorts of methods part of your training? And if so,
Mhm.
how has industry, because I know, shout out to Epic, the good folks at Epic who look at ethnography in industry. Was that your methodological approach, that sort of embeddedness and immersion? And how did that translate to your work in industry? Were you asked to do those sorts of things, to sort of embed and observe? Walk me through how that method translated from academic to industry.
Yeah. So eth- ethnographic research or ethnography actually started in anthropology. They were the creators of it, so to speak. And so yeah, you can imagine, people spending years at a time living with a group of people and deeply immersing themselves with their way of life, the activities that they do on a daily basis, the rituals that they experience. Talking with them about their values, their belief systems, their perspectives about how they navigate the world and their realities. And so we are taught to be very observant in where we are immersing ourselves, but also to participate. And so one of the methodologies is participant observation, which today a lot of people misapply it to observing participants, but it's
Mm,
being a participant and an observer. And so some of that involves conducting the same kind of activities that others are doing in order to understand the processes, and then have the context of their beliefs as well. So some of those things I continue to take on in the industries that we work with now. I think the most difficult thing is that we don't have 2 years to go spend with people.
sure, sure.
Um, and for the most part, we're studying kind of our own culture, so to speak, in our own
Mhm.
population. So there is a lot of foundational understanding that we already have. And there's a lot of, research projects that are constantly ongoing. So in a sense, we are researching these populations for years and years, but it's not that we are living in their home with them
Yeah,
for this
yeah.
time. So it's more on the smaller scale of getting up close with people, and really meeting them where they are. So if it's in terms of seeing how someone uses your product and it's a machine, then going into their home and watching them use it, and taking time to really observe the different ways that they're using it, the workarounds that they have, and the distractions that they have all around them in their home, whether it's a pet or a child or phone calls and things like that, and really getting that context, and just getting really close to those types of things. Or it could be shopping with them, and really seeing how they are exploring the products that you sell and the competitors that are shelved around you, and being able to observe those behaviors.
I have heard of some, especially market research or consumer insights type research functions, using those in homes to really get a lot of that context. And I know some of the better researchers and research teams are those who are trained in anthropological methods, namely ethnography. I ask that because I'm curious. Your time in CNR, 8 years there, you've been helping a wide range of teams and companies. Today, when you go into an engagement, again, with a sort of composite customer, I'm asking you to paint with a very broad brush. How do they understand qualitative research? Is that just anything that's not quantifiable data? How do you and your team typically hear executives or leaders talk about qual? Is it a conversation that you have to get to an agreed upon understanding? Walk us through what the pulse is, or what the view of qualitative research today from industry is. What is it?
Mhm. It's vast. So there are a lot of varied interpretations of what qualitative research is and what qualitative research can or can't do.
Hmm.
And so our job is to be a consultant to our stakeholders and to our clients, and really understand first and foremost, what are they trying to achieve in terms of what do they want to learn, and what are they hoping to do with what they learn. And from there, we can then provide recommendations on if it makes sense to conduct a certain methodology. And it can start as broadly as helping them understand whether it's quantitative research or qualitative research based on, the type of research questions that they have. Sometimes they'll come to us with a research question that they think is qualitative, but it's actually better done quantitatively because they want to understand the magnitude of something, or they want to validate something. But if they come to us and they really want to deeply explore something, obviously that would be then qualitative research. And from within that, we ask many questions about, again, going to their goals of what are they hoping to achieve, what are they hoping to understand, and then that we can then provide recommendations on if it's better to do a focus group, if it's better to do an in-home ethnography, if it's better to do an online ethnography and talk to a national sample of participants across the country, and get into their homes kind of in a remote way. So all of that comes with the conversations that we have with our clients very early on in the process, so that we can be the best consultants and the best stewards of the research that we do.
And I want to get to some of those methods that you alluded to, the in-homes, the online, maybe diary sorts of approaches, but staying at this theoretical level, I won't speak for everyone, but I often hear qualitative researchers and teams talk about its value primarily as understanding the why behind the what, or the how behind the when. Is that still how executives and decision makers and companies who are trying to pivot to this much more much faster moving, somehow automated age where data seems to be infinitely accessible, are they still struggling with that why beneath what they're seeing in trends? Is that what's leading them to your doorstep in qualitative work?
Yes, I would say that the why is the main reason, and of course then the how. I think even that can sometimes be forgotten because sometimes we hear that data really drives decisions, that stakeholders really want to have the numbers behind things, and sometimes they forget that they have to conduct the qualitative research and to understand the why. And so yeah, we have our stakeholders come to us saying that we know X number of people are abandoning our website on the homepage, but we don't know why. And so qualitative research then helps to understand what is happening, identify those opportunities, and to prioritize those opportunities. I think one of the other really important things to take it even a layer further is that another reason to conduct qualitative research and a benefit of it for our stakeholders is about context and meaning. And two of those things is really ultimately what we're all trying to achieve when we're conducting qualitative research. We want to understand that context behind that choice or that decision that someone is making quantitatively in a closed-ended question, of what is revolved around that decision that they made, and also to understand the meaning behind the words that they use. So we all use the same words, but we have different meanings behind them. We have different implications to kind of what we're saying and how we're saying it. And in so much of what we do, it's really deeply important to understand when words are being used, whether it's by a brand or by a consumer, that we understand what the meaning is behind it, what the intention is behind it, so that we can help brands kind of meet a consumer in the middle and communicate to them in a way that fits the meaning that they have for that term or that concept or that belief.
I so appreciate that you're mentioning context and decisions in your response there, because I think for a lot of mixed methods or qualitative leaning practitioners, they struggle with the ROI. For the listeners, I'm using air quotes, although it is a real thing. It's not fake. But I think to your point about how might we influence stakeholders to see the value of and invest in non-quantitative research or non-quantitative approaches of asking questions, you've laid it out there to my ear perfectly. It's giving you more context around the data point. You as a PM might pull open a dashboard and see usage is up by this number, but why? What's happening around? And I think it also matches, qualitative research really matches the context, our environment in which we live. Our customers are not, I mean, some of them might be opening up their laptop and going to a bank's website or an e-commerce site in a quiet, controlled environment, but it's more likely that they're on a train commuting into work, switching between windows, juggling 5 different things for good or not. And so there's a lot of things that qualitative research can begin to tease out and then make recommendations around, for builders of products and systems, marketers of those systems. I think for me, qualitative continues to be important, not just because of that environment, but also finally, users have so much choice. And so making a decision, building a system, marketing a thing with them in mind, when you can tailor an experience or share that you've actually listened, that really makes a difference. I talk to my students all the time, and they lead with authenticity, trust. They know they can probably find a product just about anywhere. They want to like the brand that they are buying it from. They want to trust the company that's marketing it. And so are those some of the questions? Let's move again. I understand it's high level here, but certainly the questions might be around market fit, but do you have brands struggling with how we can, I guess, what are some of the questions that qualitative research really helps drive for the customers that you work with, or do you think are best suited for? We've got the idea of the why, but are there how do we position ourselves to be data savvy? What questions is qual best suited to answer or better suited?
Yeah. So I think, and just to kind of tack on to what you were saying before too, that point of authenticity is really key as well. I'm glad you brought that up, because we can't be good storytellers without that context, and we can't be authentic without having that context as well. And so yes, we definitely have brands today that are more concerned and increasingly concerned with being authentic, and not really seeming like they're communicating to their consumers in a superficial way, and that they're truly resonating with them and their life, whether it's through communications and showing just a single moment that really resonates with someone, or using words that really resonate with them, or a moment that encapsulates a struggle or a problem that someone has. And so a lot of what we do ties into identifying those pain points, those struggles, the desires, the hopes and the dreams that people have. So
Sure.
so we really understand what truly matters to them. And going back to the point of context, sometimes the harsh truth is that your brand is such a small part of a person's
Yes.
life, and you can't really know that from a data point. You know that from spending time with person and really deeply understanding what is important to them and what matters to them, and talking through other elements of their life, and not just focusing on the key questions that you want to have answered, but taking it a step back and saying, hey, tell me about what your typical day looks like. Tell me what happens across your week. What are the most important things to you in your life? What are you trying to achieve? What are your goals? And then having that context about that individual, and then the sample of individuals that you're talking to, you can better situate um, how much your brand or your product does or doesn't matter to them, so that you're being even more effective and not trying to come off as trying too hard, if it's something that's not a huge part of their life.
That's so helpful. I'm wondering, I'd like to move to the theory of qual to more of its practice, which it specifically, given that you're a leader of qualitative researchers, qualitative thinkers, what does today's qual researcher use to do their work? You alluded to online open ends, I expect, or diary studies. I'm guessing that moderated sorts of sessions are also core to the work you and your team do. Sketch out those techniques. What is today's qualitative practitioner doing to get at that why and that context?
hmm Yeah. So at its core, we're primarily um, it's humans talking to humans first and foremost, but we are conducting live qualitative research. We're conducting asynchronous qualitative research. And we have various methodologies kind of within that. So we will do one-on-one interviews, focus groups. I mentioned before shop alongs or dine alongs or drive alongs, in-home ethnographies. In the online portion of it, we are doing online discussion boards, diaries, journals. We'll do kind of shopping missions where shoppers will asynchronously kind of go into stores and do a scavenger hunt of different activities and provide pictures and videos and immerse us in that experience that they have when they go to a specific location, whether it's a store, a restaurant, or something else. And so we are primarily still, conducting at its core the same methods, but putting ourselves in different scenarios, putting ourselves in different environments, adapting to the fact that, again, we can't spend 2 years living at home with someone. There are consumers that live across the country, and we can't fly to 10 different cities in 1 week, but we can talk to individuals online. We can have them provide video responses to activities. That can complete activities online where they are getting us as close as possible to a process or things that they're going through on their on a daily basis, and providing pictures and all of those details to get us even more context.
And I want to revisit how you and your team compile, synthesize, analyze those things into really compelling reports. But I want to revisit, you said humans interviewing humans. So let's take a quick pause and jump into what I'm confident listeners and viewers of this will be familiar with, and that is, or if not, AI moderated sorts of research tooling. One of the many, many, many different outgrowths of LLMs in research specifically is that there are lots of great, which is to say beautifully designed, very well marketed, sometimes very useful tools wherein an artificial intelligence agent or an LLM will interact with a human flesh and bone participant, user, customer, and that's how the moderated session works. I want to get your take on this. Is your team using it? Where are you, if so? And how might this change the work that you and your team are doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we are using an AI moderator for some of our projects. It's a capability that we offer. And we usually tag it on to quantitative projects that need a lot of speed and efficiency. But we provide it kind of with the caveat that it's not replacing, deep exploratory qualitative research. And a lot of our clients understand that. But we do explain and consult with our clients and help them know kind of what it can provide and what it can't provide. We wouldn't be good stewards of qualitative research if we suggested that this was a replacement of conducting, 16 one-on-one interviews. But in the age of always perpetually trying to get things done quicker, faster, cheaper, this is a way that can help our clients be more efficient, whether it's cost efficient, time efficient, and get a little bit closer to understanding a little bit of that context or that meaning that's needed to then create a well thought through quantitative research tool. And so it kind of works in conjunction with that, to help then create a better quantitative survey.
I have heard that's really clarifying, because I have heard some teams taking those AI moderation tools. They and their team or a few moderators will conduct some of the early sort of, not piloting, but they'll take the early interviews, get a sense of the sort of lay of the land, sharpen and refine the moderator guide, and then if they feel comfortable, maybe deploying that AI moderator so that they can do many more interviews than they might, or as you said, maybe get some different geographics, or go and get a really nice census matched population. Are there other use cases that you are either currently experimenting with or are having success with AI moderation? I want to talk about if you're using AI for any of your analysis and synthesis in a second, but let's stick with moderation. Is AI helping in any other ways, or might it?
Yeah, and again, it's another tool that kind of complements quantitative research. We can provide additional probes in open ends in order to encourage a deeper, more thoughtful open end response, and follow up on some key points that were mentioned in that participant's response. So instead of just getting kind of a one sentence answer, we can push for a little bit more, get a little bit more detail, because we know that there's a lot of times when you're going into open ends and looking through, you're like, man, I wish I could have just
Sure.
asked
Oh,
one
yeah.
more thing, one more thing. And so that provides a little bit more of that context in the situation of doing quantitative surveys and getting a little bit more out of that.
Is your team using AI in any other ways? Generating moderation guides, drafting plans. I'm saying this because Nick, if you might drop this in the chat, when we ran our AI research report last year, these were some of the examples that researchers mentioned. They were very hesitant, or they were hesitant to let it have too much exposure directly to participants, but they were more comfortable having it as a thought partner or a co-designer. How are you and your team are thinking about or already using AI beyond moderation?
Yeah. So for the qualitative researchers, we're using it a lot more on the analysis side, and kind of administratively. So helping us be a little bit more efficient with certain tasks that could just be done quicker if AI can do it.
Sure.
Either organizing thoughts or just saying something in a pithier way, are just some smaller examples of how we're using it. But we, as a team, we kind of approach using AI right now as an exploration, and as kind of a test. It's something that we are continuously kind of pressure testing it. And we use several different programs for AI analysis and have tested out several different ones. And anybody who is a qualitative researcher on this call knows that there are platforms that have AI analysis kind of attached to them. So we've tested a lot of those, and we kind of play around a little bit and see, if we give it this, what is it going to spit back out at us? And so we're finding some different things where we'll have kind of moments of magic where it's like, oh my gosh, came up with something really amazing that has just changed our world today. And then there's other times where, we're pushing it, and it's just not working as well as a human brain would. So I think one of the ways that I have approached it, and specifically with the programs that I use, I think of it as a research assistant. And I provide it with some tasks that I already kind of know the answer to, or at least I'm almost there. But I wanted to maybe provide me with some suggestions, or maybe it's going to spark an idea for me that I wasn't going to think. And so I'll have it complete tasks in that way. But a lot of times I'm actually coaching it and providing it feedback and saying, that's close. However, what I really want is this, or this, because frankly, if you were to just put the transcripts in and say, summarize these interviews or give me themes, whatever the prompt might be, it comes out kind of vanilla. And our reports are delivered. We have to tell a story, and AI only gets to that first layer. It can help kind of categorize the chunks of data that you have. In qualitative research, it is data. A lot of people don't think of it that way, but we are getting data points. The words that people are using, the quotes, the verbatims, those are data points. And so it is summarizing for us some of those themes. But we then have to take it those next steps. We are taking those themes and we are turning them into insights based on the observations that we've done, based on what we know about our stakeholders, what their goals are, what their needs are, what the team already knows and understands. And then we are also prioritizing those insights and identifying those key opportunities. And I have not seen AI be able to do that for me. And if it can get anywhere close, it requires a lot of my input. And so, really, at this point, it is something that, again, is a research assistant. But we are still the ones who are taking it those other steps further, steps, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I listed, and taking it to that level that we are creating something that is actually useful for our stakeholders, and they know what to act on once we provide them with the story, the deliverable, the insights.
Yeah, I have heard much the same from other teams. The AI as an augment to work you're already doing, not a replacement. Its use is dramatically increased when you, the researcher, have done your due diligence and are bringing the context. It doesn't know. The LLM doesn't know the context of your stakeholders, I mean, you can, as you said, like you can try to prompt engineer that and spend a lot of your time hoping that it gets it. But yeah, I have found success where I've already done a lot of the coding and I'm telling it about the codes and then it's looking for some of those codes, but I already have a good sense of those codes. So I can gut check and cross check and really, like you said, course correct when needed. It is really, it lacks a lot of that nuance. And as someone who's a big fan of nonverbals and paralinguistics, it doesn't right now have a sense of any of that. And if you've moderated even a few sessions with customers, you can add that to, as you said there, to the story of sharing. This verbatim says this, but here's the video where you can really hear this customer is confused or delighted or whatever the thing is. And so let's move there. The outputs, the deliverables, the reports. This is, I think, where qualitative research really shines because we are still, thankfully, humans building things for other humans to use, to do things, get stuff done. And so when you're putting together reports, deliverables, workshops, the various things that C&R delivers for its clients, what are those things that really make a statement for stakeholders, deliver the value, make their eyes widen? What are those things? You alluded to verbatims. You talked about not wanting to have things as vanilla. What really moves the needle with qualitative research when you're sharing it?
Yeah. So some of that I would take it a step back to that relationship that you have with your stakeholders and the conversations that you have at the beginning of the project to really understand their needs, where they're going to take this research, how they're trying to act on it. And then you will create deliverables that resonate with them and are useful for them. Because there could be, I can't just say like, oh, videos, because, with some stakeholders, videos are not going to be helpful for them or just lots of verbatim. So it's really being thoughtful and customizing your deliverables to that research project, to your stakeholder needs, and making sure that you are prioritizing the things that they're needing in order to act upon the learnings and achieving their goals. So yes, videos are helpful, and I would say, especially when it comes to behavioral aspect and the nonverbal cues, like you mentioned before, a video is, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video is, 10 million words. And I find a lot with UX research that when you see someone having difficulties or not doing something, even if it's just one individual, it can paint such a better picture than describing it in a few bullet points. And so making sure that you're really illustrating those nonverbal cues and helping individuals get as close as possible to those users, and really making sure that your stories are human-centered, are user-centered, are shopper-centered, and that is actually driving the insights, and that you're providing evidence that is driving the insights. we're also finding that more and more clients and stakeholders don't want, 60 slide reports. They want to know in as pithy way as possible what those key points are. And so making sure that you are really tight with how you are describing the insight, while still striking that balance of providing detail and context is really important. And so it really, I'm not going to be able to think of it the exact same way that another person at CNR put it, but it's kind of that if you are able to write a report or provide a deliverable in a pithy way, it shows just even more so your skill as a researcher, and that you are able to take it one step further and not just spit all of the information out and hope the reader prioritizes and identifies all of the points, but that you are able to succinctly describe what has happened, why it happened, and what the implication is for your client or your stakeholder.
I think that's such a yes, underline, bold. I think for a lot of, especially more early career folks, they look at that report as a time to throw everything that they've done into a single repository, and that's your index or your appendix. You can do that. What you just described, Nancy, the what, so what, now what, or whatever the framework that you like, that is the primary goal of that deliverable. I mean, you're working with clients who have, you have deadlines, your clients have deadlines. And so framing it in that way shows that you've respected and thought about their own context, that you've applied many of the same principles of researchers to your actual partners there. And yeah, that's the goal. I think too often researchers are lower on creativity in that output time, and these are our babies. We've interviewed the participants. We've been maybe sifting through the hundreds of open ends. Thankfully, we largely haven't had to transcribe it ourselves, though there are some of us probably on the call who remember doing that. We're not our stakeholders just don't have that. It's not that they don't care, it's just that they need a different level of information. So I really appreciate that you and your team are thinking about delivering what we found, why it matters, and how you can execute action on it. Are there skills that you think, let's linger now a bit on skills for today's qualitative researcher and maybe tomorrow's qualitative researcher? What are the things that are still evergreen that you think, no matter how robust large language models get or how lean teams get, the effective qualitative researcher working in the industry today needs to be able to fill in the blank? Give us a couple of things that you think will be just go-to skills, mindsets, approaches, habits that a good qualitative researcher, an effective one, should have.
Mm-hmm. So some of this, going back to my anthropological training, I can't help but link anthropology and qualitative research together in my mind. So we're going to nerd out for a second on this and get back to it. But so one of anthropology taught me a ton of kind of soft skills, and ways to how to navigate the world in the workplace. And one of the biggest things, and maybe the most foundational thing that I learned in anthropology, is the concept of ethnocentrism. And that means that it's basically the idea that one's own culture, their views, their beliefs is the right or the normal one. And therefore, all other cultures, norms, beliefs are judged on that standard. And once I kind of wrapped my head around that concept and that way of thinking, it opened me up to this whole world of there are so many different perspectives. There are so many different behaviors. There are so many different ways of exploring, experiencing the world that are kind of untapped. And I want to find out all about them. And so through that, it kind of unleashed this curiosity, and this just constant, perpetual need to understand as much as I can about why people do the things that they do, and then also this lens of taking what I observe about people, their beliefs, their behaviors, their perspectives, as not necessarily right or wrong, but as one of the many ways. And in order to be a good qualitative researcher, you have to be non-judgmental. You have to be able to accept that there are many different ways of doing something. There are many different ways of seeing something, that there are many different truths for people out there. And if you can't accept that tenet, you are not going to do really deep, thorough, rigorous, helpful qualitative research. Because your job is to go out there and identify all the different ways that people are thinking about something, that people are talking about something, that people are doing something. And then taking that and finding out where those patterns exist, where those themes are, where it's a priority versus not a priority. And so with that constant curiosity, that idea of being non-judgmental and also being patient, I feel are very, very core skills that are needed to be a good qualitative researcher and to be a good moderator as well when you're one-on-one with participants. And then a lot of those skills kind of go from there, and you can kind of build on that. And so another one is being able to be flexible and be adaptable. Human beings are unpredictable and complex, and we are with human beings the whole time we're doing research. And so everything from, somebody cancels an interview to just, discovering something unexpected or unique requires adaptability and flexibility. You have to be able to think on your feet or be prepared for something unexpected to happen. When we are interviewing participants, it is not a structured conversation. Of course, there are structured interviews. That's one of the methodologies, but it's really a guided conversation. It could take so many different pathways, and you need to be ready to identify that aha moment, that thing that you weren't expecting, and dig into that and go down that rabbit hole. But then also know when to stop going down that rabbit hole, and have all of the questions that help unfold this unexpected discovery. But then be able to move on to the next thing and cover the topics that you want to cover. So making sure that you can be flexible in that way goes so far in this type of work.
And the best product managers, the best team or department leads that I've had the pleasure of collaborating with or working around, they all have the skills. They might not be qualitatively trained researchers like yourself, but they don't think of personas or segments as static. They understand that people, as they go through the various life courses, might change the way they relate to tax preparation software or do holiday shopping. If they're not a parent one year and they become a parent or care worker the next year, that might change, I bet it will, how they're going to approach the journey map that they take or the experience map that they take. I think about personas, I think about jobs to be done. A lot of these frameworks that product-centric companies use, qualitative researchers think those are useful to a point, right? Like they're useful until they stop adapting. And so that curiosity around the outlier, that one person who did that thing that one way or didn't quote unquote get it, that for you and I, Nancy, that would be where we would go. We'd be like, what's going on there? What is it? And that's how we got, I don't mean to say that accessibility research or thinking inclusively about experience has happened recently, but period, new paragraph, thinking about accessible experiences, thinking inclusively about your experience, that benefits everybody, not just folks who might have different access needs or assistive technology needs, but thinking about those outliers who might not have been served by your product experience, whatever, thinking in that way, just like you said there, being curious, not like excusing away. I'm teaching a data-driven decision-making course, and we were reviewing what counts as an insight. And we reviewed this really long from an information scientist, like 3-part in the definition of an insight. And one of the key parts of an insight are not having a closed mind to unexpected results. insights are most likely when you pursue the unexpected, when you don't sort of say like, that's probably not something we need to care about. And it might not always be the case that you're going to unlock some new business opportunity or new way or new, but you might. And a qualitative researcher's self-reflexivity, that not being too centered on one's own view and self, not letting that be a blinder, I think is useful, certainly for qualitative researchers, but I would expect stakeholders more broadly.
Yeah. And being open to the idea of uncertainty. I think a lot of people like to live in a black and white world, but
Sure.
qualitative researchers do well in that kind of fuzzy gray area in and around the black and white. And being comfortable with not having a perfect answer to something is also a really important skill to have. But then also navigating how to speak about that to your clients, because your clients may want a yes or no answer, or well, what should we do with this? And so taking that and helping them understand that, maybe there isn't a clear answer. Maybe there's a couple different pathways you could take with this, or it could just be that this area that's feeling a little fuzzy right now can be validated or explored in quantitative research, and that's where you get the more definitive answer. But qualitative research can provide some of the fuzzy answers at first, but give you something to then dig into even more so in the quantitative research.
Well, what skills for not just any researcher, but certainly someone working in today's business environment who might be using qualitative open-ended analysis or bumping into these sorts of things, what skills are maybe given too much weight or overhyped, and what do you think is not given enough attention? So if someone's listening to this and they're job seeking and they're wanting to develop skills, or maybe someone's hiring for a researcher, what are skills that are maybe given too much weight or overhyped, and what do you think those are that don't get enough love?
Yeah. So I'll start with the ones that I feel like aren't getting enough love. And I think some of those things I've kind of alluded to in some of the previous points too, that just the skills around being kind of innately curious, being patient, being non-judgmental, and accepting of different perspectives. I think those are very, very important skills that don't show up necessarily in a job description of a qualitative researcher, but really make you a good researcher, a good analyst, a good interpreter of data, and also a good storyteller. I would say that being a uh, you know really well adept at certain softwares or platforms or things like that sometimes can be overemphasized, which for a lot of what we do, it really comes down to what you are able to do with human beings, and how you understand human beings, and the way you talk and the way you listen. We also talk a lot about being an active listener, in being a good moderator, and that in a sense is a table stakes skill. But I would say that one that isn't appreciated enough or talked about enough is being a good deep listener, which I see as a step beyond an active listener. So that there's skills that you're taught in order to listen and engage with someone, but being a deep listener is much more than just those verbal, nonverbal cues that we do as we're having a conversation with someone, but really fully immersing yourself in that 60 minutes or 2 hours that you have with that person, and remembering what they are telling you, and taking in what they're telling you, and acknowledging their beliefs, their presence, their details that they're sharing with you, and going back to it, and helping to like weave that story together as you're talking, and really talking with them about their experiences, and saying, you mentioned before that this was really important to you, and now you're saying that it's something different. Help me understand why is there this contradiction, or building out why they have these contradictions and building out the complexity of them as a person. And a lot of that comes from deeply listening to them and truly understanding all of those different facets around them.
We'll close here. You've been at C+R for 8 years, leading qualitative research. You've been doing qualitative research for longer than that. We had a lot of questions leading up to our conversation. We solicited some from our listeners, and a lot of them were around making sure that qual has a seat at the table, or advocating for its value in this ever quantifying world. We've talked directly and indirectly about how we can get some of that value throughout our conversation, but I want to close with, how can qualitative teams, researchers, folks who are working with open-ended unstructured data, how can we make sure that this stays valuable for the next, say, 8 years? How are you going to, for your team at C+R, make sure that these sorts of approaches and ways of asking questions and ways of seeing the world are valuable, not just for industry, but for non-industry? So essentially, make a prediction as to why you believe and are bullish about qualitative research going into 2026 and beyond.
Well, I will say some of it comes maybe with a little bit of cockiness that we will always need it. There will always be those questions, and you can't answer those questions without it. But in reality, I think it's important to talk with your stakeholders and really make sure that you are understanding what they want to know, and having those early on conversations. I can't say enough about really just having those early on conversations, understanding what they need, understanding the questions that they have, and being able to effectively explain to them, coach them, consult with them about why they need to understand the whys and how they won't be able to achieve what they need to achieve without it. I think, a company, a team could go months and months and months, years doing quantitative research and get some questions answered, maybe for the sake of saving time and money, but in the long run, it's really not going to provide any savings, because you're going to have to then backtrack and you're going to have to catch up and go back to square one, and you'll realize that you need to spend more time with your customers, with your users, with your shoppers, and go back to understanding those whys, understanding their context, their meaning, their values, and their beliefs.
I love it. I hope that anyone listening to this who's qualitatively minded brings a little bit more of that swagger, confidence, and maybe even cockiness to their stakeholder conversations, because it is valuable. Any company that wants to exist more than one quarter should meet the demands of and expectations of their customers, shoppers, and consumers. Nancy Baum, VP of Qualitative Research of C+R Research, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.